In the beginning, darkness reigned in the abyss, but the Spirit of God. Moving on, water ready to do miracles, then God transformed. Nothing in something extraordinary. Suddenly God said, "Let there be light," and as if by art. From magic light was born. God saw that the light was good and separated it from the darkness was called day and the darkness was called night. The night came and tomorrow it's the first day, so the first day is over. Next God said, "Let there be a firmament between the waters," and I separated them, and so God divided the water in two. The things which are under the waters and the things which are above the waters, which God called heaven. Night came and morning came. And it was the second day and the third day, and God said, "The waters under the sky gather in one place and let dry land appear." And so it happened to dry land. God called it earth and gathered together the waters. He called them seas, and again he said, amazed at his work, but God did not stop there. He continued saying that there was plants on earth produce seed herbs and seed fruits. According to each type, and thus from the bare ground, vegetation begins to sprout. Herbs and plants that bear seeds all follow. And God said it was good. Night came and morning came. It was the third day. The next day God said, "Let there be light in the sky." They stand there day and night and act as markers of the seasons, days and years, and so the light appears extraordinary. Dancing in the sky, marking the rhythm of the seasons and the passing of days and years, two majestic stars. The eldest became a majestic king who ruled the day with his dazzling light. The son and the youngest is a mysterious queen who watches the moon and stars at night with her gentle light. Tiny gems scattered across the sky, illuminating the ground with their brilliance. Jingle and God, pleased with his creation, smiled at the harmony of light and darkness, but creation was not on the fifth day. God said that water, filled with living creatures and birds flying across the earth, across the sky in a moment. The water comes alive, teeming with marine life of all shapes and sizes. Giant sea animals swim through the depths while schools of colorful fish swim. In sync in the sky, the birds spread their wings to paint the sky with their exotic plumage and fill the air with their melodious songs. God was pleased with them and blessed them, telling them to be fruitful and multiply. Multiply, fill the seas, and let birds breed on the earth at night. And tomorrow it was Thursday. Until then, the earth shook silently. When God once again told the earth to create living creatures, pets and reptiles of their species in the blink of an eye. Close your eyes, the earth has turned into paradise filled with swarming life. Of animals grazing on green pastures while wild beasts roar in the jungle, reptiles of all the terrestrial crawling species left behind. Footprints on the earth, kings and lords as they contemplate the diversity and beauty of his creation. Knew it was good, but the last piece was missing, masterpiece. Adam and Eve. Of God's creation in a solemn and purposeful tone, declaring, "Let us do man in our image and likeness, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and master them, the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living thing." Animals crawl on the ground, and so God created man according to his will, image and likeness, and gave him an extraordinary gift of dominion over all. Creation is destined to rule and care for all the wonders that God has created. But God in his infinite wisdom knows that his creatures, they will need nurturing, so in a generous gesture, he said, "I will give them the earth, every seed-bearing plant, and every tree that bears fruit with seed. All these will serve him. And I give green grass for food to every beast of the earth, for all the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves on the ground." Earth, and so it happened when God looked at everything he had done in his heart. To my satisfaction, it is a masterpiece, a testament to his power and love that is limitless. And so with the coming of the night and the dawn of the sixth day of the Lord, he looked at his creation and saw that it was very good. So the heavens were completed, and the earth and all that is in it. When the seventh day came, God rested. Because he had finished all the work he had undertaken, God blessed the seventh day, and I sanctify it because on that day he rested from all his work of creation. This is the story of created the heavens and the earth, but there was no bush on it. Now grass had not yet sprouted on the ground, for God had not made it yet, and the rain was still on the earth. And man did not exist to cultivate it. Then God took the dust from earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man's lungs came alive. They took a deep breath, and their hearts began to pound. Their eyes opened for the first time, and looking at the world around him in wonder, in an act of love, God decided to create a place. In particular, humans planted a garden to the east of Eden and made it grow. All kinds of plants are eye-catching and good to eat in the middle. The garden produced the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eden was not just a pleasure to the eyes, but also life and food for them. Deep a clear river flows through, irrigating the garden, dividing it into 4 channels extend to the ends of the earth. The first channel is called human and go all over Javel region where there is gold. The gold of this area is also good. Also has very good resin and agate. The second is called Gijon. It flows through the entire Crush region. The third river is called the Tigris, which flows to here is Assyria, and the fourth is Euphrates in the middle of this idyllic scene. God placed the man he created to cultivate and care for this wonderful garden, but he commanded the man one thing: you may eat from every tree in the garden except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You shall not eat of its fruit on that day. Eat it, you will surely die. This is the only commandment that God gave to man at that time. God taught man all the animals he created so that man could name them, and so that man could name them. Name all living things, all domestic animals, all birds, from the sky and all the animals in the field. However, despite the beauty and the diversity of human creation feels inadequate to God in his infinite wisdom. He understood the needs of man and said that it is not good for man to be alone. I will help man properly. Then God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, he was sleeping and took out a rib and closed the wound with the rib in his hand. God created a woman to be the perfect companion for every man. Every curve of feature is molded with love and purpose. Suddenly he woke up and was surprised to see the woman God had created with a broken voice. He cried out emotionally, "This is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh.
She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And the man called his wife Eve, because she would be the mother of all living things." And from that moment on, it was determined that a man would leave his father and mother for his wife, and together they would become one. Only then, in the midst of a lush and vibrant garden, human history in the period of human innocence and purity, and women are naked, but they are not ashamed. Their nudity is a reflection of the purity of their souls and their complete trust in the Creator and in themselves. Adam and Eve themselves lived in a state of absolute happiness in the magical garden. In Eden, her days passed amid laughter and walks along flower-filled paths. Explore the corners of Eden and be amazed by each new creature and the delicious fruit they discovered filled their hearts with gratitude to God for the abundance He had given them. Accepted, but in the darkness of the garden, a cunning figure was watching the snake. With a sly smile, he slid over to Eve. God had indeed said not to eat from. No tree in the garden whispered, sowing doubt. Eve hesitated, but he naively responded by eating the fruit of all the trees except the tree of knowledge. Good and evil, you shall not die, the voice of the serpent. Become more intense with seduction, but your eyes will open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil, desiring to know what is forbidden. It burned in Eve's heart. Unable to resist the temptation, she reached out her hand. She took the fruit and found it to be so delicious that she shared it with her husband, and that was it. The man also ate the forbidden fruit, and suddenly both of their eyes were gone. They opened their hearts and realized a reality that had been hidden until then. Nakedness previously unnoticed now filled them with. Ashamed, with trembling hands, they wove fig leaves to cover their bodies. The weak sought refuge in the bushes of the garden as the day began to cool. When the man and woman heard that God was walking around the garden, they felt even more ashamed, and they ran away among the trees so that God would not see them naked. But God called to the man and said, "Where are you?" The man replied, "I heard that God was walking around garden and I'm scared because I'm naked. That's why I hide, and who told you you were naked?" God asked, "Did you eat the fruit that I forbade you to eat?" The woman that God gave me as a companion replied, "She gave me that fruit and I ate it." Then God the Lord asked, "Woman, what have you done?" replied the snake. "I have eaten," God said to the snake in a solemn and firm voice. "Because of what you have done, you will be among all the animals. In the water, like wild, will pull you down, and you will eat dust all the days of your life, and keep saying that I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed will crush your head, but you will hurt him." Then God turned to the woman and spoke the echoing words, "Throughout your generations I will multiply your pain in childbirth, and you will give birth to children in pain. You will desire your husband, and he will dominate you." In the end, God looks at the man and he looks at him. He said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate the fruit that I forbade you to eat. Cursed shall be the ground for you with suffering. You shall eat from it all. All the days of your life it shall produce thorns and thistles for you, and you shall eat weeds, while you will earn your bread by the sweat of your brow till you return to the same, the ground from which you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Then you will return." God made the man and his wife clothes of skins. He dressed them and told them that humans became like us because had knowledge of good and evil, and in the end God banished man and woman. Woman of Eden with a broken heart but with a strong determination to protect its creatures, where perfect communion and beauty are no more, could be their home because sin entered the world while they were away. The garden disappeared from sight, and the first sunset outside Eden tinged. In red, the creation of the universe is full of wonders and tragedies marked. The beginning of an eternal story of struggle and hope in the arid eastern plains. Cain and Abel. From Eden, Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain was the firstborn. His younger brother Abel worked under the hot sun pulling out weeds. He led his flock through the pastures, with his face radiant with the peace that Cain had. "I don't know," one day Cain cried out to Abel, "God seems pleased with you, but not pleased with my gift. What do you have that I don't have?" Abel caressed one of the sheep answered calmly that it was the heart. The Lord looked at the heart. Abel's words echoed in Cain's mind. Days passed, and jealousy grew like a shadow inside him one night under the cloudy sky. Cain decided, "Come to the field with me tomorrow," he said to Abel with his eyes hiding their true intentions. At dawn, the two brothers, they saw the tension in the field, the heavy air. "God favors you, not me," Cain asked. His voice was a dangerous whisper. "That is our faith, Cain. God, he wants us to give him our best sincerely," Abel replied without knowing it. The sudden threat broke the calm of the field with a dry sound of Cain. A stone in his hand hit Abel on the head, causing Abel to fall to the ground with it. Eyes full of surprise and pain, "My brother," Cain muttered in front of him. The voice would extinguish forever the land that until that time had existed. A life scene became the first witness to the oldest crime. Abel's blood soaked the ground, crying out for justice to heaven. Cain, with his hands shaking and covered in blood, he looked back in horror at what he had done. Suddenly, a voice rang out in his mind, loud and omnipotent. "Where is his brother?" "Abel, I don't know. Maybe I'm my brother's keeper," Cain replied, his voice choked. "Through fear and sin, God has sternly declared your blood. My brothers, cry out to me from the ground, and you will be cursed and banished from this land." Who opened his mouth to receive the blood of his brothers, the tragedy of Cain and Abel was left behind. Engraved in the hearts of mankind, an eternal reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and hatred. Time passed, but the earth became corrupted. The wickedness of man was so great, the Lord looked on with a sad and decisive look. End the depravity, but in the midst of this darkness, hope fell on one man, Noah. Noah and the flood. At 600, Noah felt the weight of age as he looked at the dark sky. He thought his doomsday was near. The world around him had become corrupted by. Completely filled with evil and violence, God's voice resonates deep and clear. Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh because the earth is filled with violence because. For they built a ship of cypress wood and made rooms in it, and covered it inside and out with asphalt, the vastness of what it says. It took his breath away because God had chosen him for a mission beyond his reach. It took his breath away because God had chosen him for a mission beyond his reach. Noah's understanding made him obey immediately, but his family did not easily doubt him. He and they whispered behind his back, "You are crazy, a ship on dry land." Their children whispered, the neighbors jeered, the laughter was full of contempt. "Build an ark on land. Noah's, you are crazy, judgment is coming," Noah's replied. His firm voice and confident eyes of those days had become. Weeks, months, every day is a marathon of effort. Physical and stress is evident. Time seems to pass faster than it should. Can work in the middle of construction with high moments. Stressful afternoon while fixing a critical beam the wind picked up. Suddenly threatens to bring everything crashing down quickly. Keep them, they run to help sweat running down their foreheads as they struggle. Against wooden elements creaking under pressure for a moment. Peace, Noah and his wife stopped to observe. "Work, do you really think this will work?" She doubted with obvious anxiety in her. "His voice is the will of God," Noah replied, "and in his will we find." Hopefully, in the final days of construction, tensions have reached a boiling point. Maximum begins to form on the horizon, a constant reminder of the coming storm. Then God has commanded, "Come to you and all your household on board. For I have seen you righteous before me in this generation of every clean animal, which you shall take. All 7 male and female couples plus unclean animals. The male and female pair are also 7 pairs of birds of the air. Male and female to maintain life on earth, because in those days I will cause it to rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will purify the land. The ground to every living creature I created at dawn from the farthest corners. Away from earth, animals began to come to elephants, lions. Deer and birds of all colors and sizes gathered together in one place as if an invisible force guided them. The atmosphere was tense and urgent. The timing was perfect. But the challenge is to stay calm amidst the chaos as the final couple of animals climbing aboard the sky suddenly darkened the first drops. They fell down, followed by a continuous flood. Everyone inside Noah gave orders. The family entered the ship, looking back at the world one last time. They suddenly left through the door. The boat began to close, a strong wind blew, and rain began to fall. With fury, drops of water become floods in seconds. The curious onlookers were soon frightened. Noah was right. They screamed. Run towards the ship that desperately knocked on the door, leaving us behind. But it was too late. The rising water quickly swallowed them. The city and the mountains, the screams outside had faded and were replaced by sound. The unpleasant sound of water and creaking wood inside Noah's Ark and his family. They heard the roar of God's judgment with hearts filled with fear. But also of God's hope. Why do we ask? One of the sons of Noah voice trembled, because we found grace before. Noah responded with eyes filled with gratitude and wonder for 40 days and 40 nights. The rain never stopped. The boat floated on the water, floating on the sea.
The endless destruction. Finally, the flood stopped and the ship stranded. On Mount Ararat, Noah tremblingly opened the window and handed out a shovel. On the third try, the pigeon flew back to the ground with an olive leaf in its beak. Noah declared his hopeful voice, the sun rising above the horizon, bathing him in. The earth was renewed with its warm light, which Noah and his family admired. The world was waiting for them, and then God said, "Come out, you and your wife, and your children and your sons' wives, and all the living creatures that are with you. All the flesh of birds and beasts, and every creeping thing that moves on the earth. You will take the land with you, and go throughout the land and make it fruitful. On earth I make a covenant with you," said the Lord, his voice echoing in the clear air. "I will never again destroy all life with a flood. I have drawn my bow. The clouds and the rainbow will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth." Bright and colorful appearing in the sky symbolizes God's promise. Noah and his family stood on the new earth and looked to the future with hope. Know that they witnessed and survived the greatest judgment the earth has ever known. The sun shines on the new earth and life flourishes under the blessing of God. Noah. After completing his mission, he decided to plant a vineyard with thyme vines. They grew and bore fruit, and Noah, hoping to celebrate new life, did. One night, after working hard, Noah drank his fruit. The strong and intoxicating grape wine quickly took its toll on Noah without even realizing it. He fell asleep in his tent, naked and exposed, until one of his sons entered the tent, and seeing his father in that state, instead of protecting him and respecting his dignity, he went out and mocked him and his brothers. "Come see Santa Claus." Drunk and naked spoke orange voice full of contempt, Sem and Yafet Al. Hearing Cam's words, they looked at their brother with disapproval. "This is not right," he said. Sem was serious and didn't say anything more. Tim took a blanket and stepped back so he couldn't see his father's nakedness and covered him respectfully. The next morning, Noah, waking up, his hangover was nothing compared to the humiliation he felt. Knowing what happened, Cam asked, "What did you do?" His voice was full of pain. And the disappointment Cam saw, the rage in his father's eyes remained. Silenced, Noah was full of anger and sadness, uttered one. "Cursed is Canaan, the servant of the servant will be his brother, then Noah will..." He turned respectfully to Shem and Japheth, who had protected him. "Blessed be the Lord my God." Shem and made Canaan his servant. May God glorify Japheth and let him dwell in his tents. Shem and made Canaan his servant Noah, the righteous man who survived the flood. He is also human and vulnerable. Time passes and something new. The earth began to fill with life and activity. Noah, the man, was survived the flood and watched his children and grandchildren grow up in a renewed world. 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yafet, became the patriarchs of many. Nations and their descendants spread across the earth without their father's blessed son, became the ancestors of the Semites, including the Jews. Although the curse was on his son, Canaan also saw his descendants, and their children became the fathers of many African and Asian nations that spread. To the southwest, the younger Japheth saw his descendants spread out to the north. And the west, his descendants founded the nations of Europe and Asia in those days. Noah's life was prolonged in peace and contemplation, and he lived another 350 years after that. Of the flood reached an astonishing age of 950 years when Noah finally breathed his last. His last breath, his family surrounded him. A righteous man died, he spoke without him. His words were full of emotion, but his spirit and teachings will live on forever. Always through the sons of Noah, God restarted the settlement of the earth, creating many different peoples, humanity united by a single language. Tower of Babel. Gathering in the vast plain of Shinar, let us build a city and a tower. Reach heaven, declare Nimrod their leader. Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us Not scattered across the Earth's surface, the project progresses rapidly. The bricks are stacked on top of each other, and the tower rises high, towering towards the highest sky. Nimrod was commanded on high to touch the sky, but in the Lord's heaven. I watched him tell Los Angeles that everyone is one and all are the same. This language that they started doing would not be impossible. Suddenly, the noise of work stopped. A worker asking more thieves. He found an answer. Not understanding what he just said, he asked with a confused expression for the answer. It was a stream of incomprehensible words. "What is going on?" Nimrod shouted, trying to impose order, but the words no longer had meaning and confusion spread. Like a rapid and devastating fire. "I can't understand you. Speak." Of course, in the blink of an eye, communication became chaotic among friends. All their lives, they looked at each other with eyes full of despair, Nimrod as something. They cried out, but even their commands could not overcome the babble of language. "God has punished us," he shouted. The old man's voice trembled with fear and respect. We had to suddenly disperse and stop the work. The great tower was abandoned, witnessing human ambition and divine judgment. Human groups are now divided by language and separated families. They set out in different directions to search for new lands where they could understand each other. Nimrod stood at the foot of the tower and looked around at the city he had built. Dreaming of collapsing, "This can't be happening," he muttered, but he knew it happened. Defeated by a much greater power from above, God watched. Dispersion, so one would say, his voice echoed with authority and sadness. Humanity will multiply and fill the earth, but they will not forget the price of their sacrifice. Arrogance Tower has turned into ruins, a reminder of the day when then God confused the languages and scattered people throughout the earth. God calls Abraham. God chose a family to form the people who would be the vehicle to bring the Messiah into the world. Promises a night when the stars are shining brightly, a voice. The God of heaven appeared in Abraham's life and said, "Leave your homeland and your home, your father, and go to the land where I will show you." The inaudible voice with, "But it is clearer and stronger than the roar of any storm I shall make. From you I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Cursed, and through you all the peoples of the earth will be blessed." Abraham left behind, holding my breath. How could an ordinary man be chosen for such a great destiny? Abraham was born in Chaldean Ur, a bustling city of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers brought life to the earth. His father Terah was respected, but his life was simple, full of rituals in a polytheistic society called the divine. Transformed a brutal awakening in a radical shattering. Why did I mutter Abraham under? The blanket of stars in the night sky seems as endless as it promises. He received his incredible story at the age of 75 and decided to start. "Face your fear and leave. We will inform Sarai, his wife," where she asked. She looked with anxious eyes toward the land that God would show us. He responded with determination, a heart full of hope and a budding faith that followed. The Lord left with Sarai and his nephew Lot, and all his possessions belonged to him. Canaan's journey was full of uncertainties, but the divine promise led them beyond Iran, and finally, they arrived in Canaan, a land of rolling hills and fertile valleys. The Canaanites lived in fortified cities, each ruled by a king. Abraham advanced through the country, until reaching the sacred Shechem under the mighty oak of Moreh. Suddenly, the Lord appeared again and declared to your descendants that I will give you this land. Abraham built an altar in that place and prayed to God, but it didn't take long. The land became hostile, severe famine occurred in Canaan, and fertile land was destroyed. Was turned to dust, livestock died, and food became scarce. One night, Abraham raised eyes looking up at the sky. "Why did you bring us here?" he exclaimed, looking for the answer in the number. The silence of the stars was his only answer to the regret he had made of the decision. "We will go to Egypt," informed Sar. He looked at his occupation and God's promise, "We must survive." Abraham replied, hiding his doubts behind an expression of determination. The road to Egypt was dangerous. But to stay means certain death on a night illuminated by the stars. A strong voice rang out in Abraham's mind. Don't be afraid, Abraham, I am your shield, your reward will be great. Although these words are full, his hopeful heart was still afraid. He knew that Sarai, the person he loved, his wife, was his greatest treasure, and he feared for his life in a foreign land. To protect her at all costs, once they reached Egypt, he came up with a plan. As Abraham approached Egypt, he stopped and said to Sarai, I know you are a beautiful woman. He said with worry that when the Egyptians see him, they will say she is his wife, and they will kill me for her. Would you please say that you are my sister? Sarai nodded, understanding the seriousness. From the situation, they arrived in Egypt, a city marked by discord between the luxury of the palaces and the slavery of many of the inhabitants. But Abraham was right. When entering the city, all eyes turned to the beauty of Sarai. The Egyptians took her to Pharaoh's palace, and Abraham received sheep and cows, donkeys, servants, and camels as a reward. But the joy was short-lived. The mysterious thing that befell Pharaoh and his family brought chaos and despair. Pharaoh was angry, and he faced Abraham confused. What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me that it was your wife? Because of your deception has been cursed. Take your wife and leave me. Abraham, embarrassed but relieved, left Egypt with Sarai and all the people, their possessions. As they headed toward Canaan, he reflected on what he had. God has thought of you as a true shield and guide in times of turmoil. He thinks of a return to Canaan. Abram, Sarai, and his nephew Lot face a new difficulty. His livestock and possessions had increased so much that the land could no longer support them. All the shepherds started fighting, tensions rose, and families. On the brink of conflict amid chaos, Abraham calmly calls out to Lot, he cannot. There is no dispute between us or between our pastors. We are family. Look at land in front of us. If you Tom leave, I will go to the right. If you choose, it is. Yes, I will go to the left. Lot, overlooking the green Jordan Valley, and as fertile as Eden itself, I would choose the Jordan Valley, he declared anxiously. Prospered in the fertile lands, so they split off to settle nearby. Of Sodom, a city notorious for wickedness, while Abraham stayed in Canaan that night, God said, once again, look up to Abraham, and from where you are, look toward north, southeast, and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your descendants forever. Move. Abraham built an altar to honor God, although he faced challenges and decisions. His faith was strengthened with each trial, as he knew he was not alone. So on the gray plains of Sodom, Lot began to experience the aftermath of his election is a shadow of corruption and lurking danger. About him and his family, Abraham did not know until one day he came down. The shadow of the Mamre oak looked up and saw three men standing nearby. He ran towards them without hesitation and knelt down. My lord, he said, let me bring you some water urgently. To wash your feet and rest under this tree, I will invite you to eat, so he can regain his strength before continuing on his journey. Okay, they replied. They did as you said. Abraham hurried to the tent and told. Sarai quickly took 3 quantities of the best ayam masala powder and made bread. Then he ran to the herd, selected the best calf, and gave it to the servant to prepare immediately. A feast of curds and meat was served, Abraham standing by. As they were eating under the tree, a man asked, where is Sarai? And his wife was in the tent. Abraham answered, and one of them said to him, authority, I will visit you again in a year, and by then salary will have. There was a boy from the entrance of Sarai's store who heard that and chuckled, and thought, maybe I will have this joy now that I am withered and my husband is a. The old man God said to Abraham, why did Sarai laugh? She thought she was not. You can have children when you are old, but there is something impossible for God during this time. I will return to you, and Sarai will have a son after eating the men. They stood up and looked toward Sodom. Abraham went with them to say goodbye. Then God shared his plan with Abraham. The cry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and its sin so serious that I will go down to see if its actions are as bad as the cry. It came to me, but Abraham asked with concern that you would destroy the righteous together. With the wicked, suppose there are 50 righteous people in the city, you will destroy it rather than... The Lord replied, because of the 50 righteous people who are there, the Lord will spare this place. If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the whole city. For them, though I am but dust and ashes, I have. Dare to say, and if only 10 people are found, Abraham God affirmed. Conclusion. For the love of 10 people, I will not destroy it after the conversation, Abraham. He returned to his tent filled with fear. He knew that his nephew Lot. In Sodom, when in Sodom there were 2 angels entering the city. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sitting at the entrance and seeing them, he immediately stood up and approached them, asking them to come. The servant's house to spend the night, he begged the servant to wash their feet and give. Tomorrow they will continue on their way, they replied. We will not pass. Night in the square. But Lot begged so much that they accepted and went to his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread together, which they shared. Food, suddenly a crowd surrounded the house with sticks in their hands and shouting, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Take them out. Lot has gone out. Talk to them. Close the door behind you. Yes, please, my brothers, no. Do this evil deed, he begged desperately, the crowd responded. Angrily avoided this foreigner who came to live among us, and now he wants to be our judge. We will treat you worse than they do. They started to put pressure on Lot. Trying to knock on the door, suddenly Los Angeles blinded the men outside, no longer found. The angels told Lot that he had others here to get out of this place. Your family, because we will destroy this place. The residents' objection here has been, came to God and he sent us to destroy it immediately. For his family, hurry up, he will destroy the city, but they did not believe him. The angels urged Lot to quickly bring his wife and 2 men. The daughters are here, or you will be flattened when the city is punished, I doubt. But the men took him by the hand along with his wife and daughters and led him out of the city because the Lord had pity him as he is one of them. He said, run for your life, don't look. Turn around or stop anywhere in the valley, escape to the mountains, or you will... Destroyed, they ran as fast as they could towards the Zor, while the sky, sulfur and fire from heaven fell on Sodom and Gomorrah and destroyed those people. Cities, entire plains for all inhabitants, and vegetation on the ground. But Lot's wife could not help but turn back to look at that moment. Turned into a pillar of salt several miles away at dawn, Abraham. He came to the place where he had been with the Lord and looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah. Suddenly he was horrified to see a thick smoke rose like smoke from a furnace. A cold air ran through. His body, the cities were judged. Although the judgment of God was, the devastation serves as a somber reminder of the consequences of sin and the importance of obeying God. Abraham moved to the land of Nev and, settling as a foreigner in Gerar, Abraham again introduced his wife. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and said, she is my sister. And he sent and took her away. That night, God appeared to Abimelech in a dream and told him that he was going to die. Because the woman you have taken away is a married woman, Abimelech was afraid. She also said, he is my brother. I acted with integrity in my hands. Clean. Then God replied, I know that you have acted with integrity, and that is why I stopped him from sinning against me. Now he returns the woman to the man because he is a prophet. You will pray, but if you do not respond, you and your family will surely die. At dawn, Abimelech called all his servants together and told them what had happened. Fear took hold of them all. Then Abimelech called Abraham and he said to him in anguish, what have you done to us? What sin have I committed against you that you have brought this upon me, and my kingdom has committed such a great mistake against me, things that should not be done? Abraham replied, I think that in this place there is no fear of God, and they will kill for my wife. Moreover, she is really my sister, my daughter, my father but not my mother, and she became my wife when God took me away. My father's house, I told him that this was the favor he would do me wherever he was. Let us go and say that he is my brother." Then Abimelech took the sheep and the cattle, male and female servants, and gave them to Abraham and restored his wife Sarai to him. Abimelech said, "My land is before you. Live wherever you think best." But later, the birth of Isaac, the event of God's miraculous visit to Abraham and Sarai and its fulfillment, his promise beyond what they could imagine, Sarai conceived and gave birth to a. When his son was old, as God had said, Abraham named him Isaac. Following the Lord's instructions, Sarai was filled with joy. "God made me laugh, and whoever finds out will laugh with me in 80 days. Abraham gave birth to and circumcised Isaac, faithfully obeying God's command. He was 100 years old when his son was born, a living testament to power and loyalty. Of God on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham prepared a great feast, but while the feast was going on, Sarai saw Ishmael, the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had given to Abraham, mocking him. "Isaac, then you are the chosen one, Ishmael," whispered. Isaac looked at him confused with. Sarai, with a stern look, approached Abraham and told him to send the slave away. "And this slave's son, because this slave's son does not want to share the inheritance with me." Isaac, Abraham's son, was surprised at Sarah's fierceness. "What?" He said. Ishmael replied, "He is my son too. I will not allow that woman and her son." "Put Isaac in danger," Sarai said, and silence fell between them that night. But Abraham did not rest. He left the tent restlessly, and he looked up at the starry sky. A soft but certain voice echoed in his head. "Do not worry about the child or your servant in anything that happens to you. Speak, listen to him, for your descendants will be called Isaac, but also the sons of. I will establish a nation for your descendants at dawn with a heart." Abraham took bread and a skin of water and went near Hagar's tent. Leaving, he said bluntly. Hagar looked at him in disbelief. "Where to go, desert?" answered Abraham, avoiding his eyes. "God will be with you after all this time," she protested. Her voice was filled with such pain. "You drive us away. It is necessary," he said. "Give him the necessary things. I cannot." Doing more with tears in her eyes, Hagar took Ishmael's hand and walked away. The desert camp stretched out before them, an endless void. It was stiflingly hot. The water in his skin was rapidly depleting. Ishmael was weak and dehydrated. He fell to the ground. "Mom, I can't take it anymore," Hagar whispered. Desperate, she set him down under a bush. "Wait here," she told him, her voice choked. He walked a few steps and, unable to bear the sight of his son dying, he burst into tears. "Oh God, why did Hagar cry out?" A voice from heaven said to her, "What are you doing? Pick up the baby and hold him in your arms, because I will make him a wonderful person." The Agar people were extremely surprised when they opened their eyes and saw a well of water that had never existed before. There he was, running over, filling their bags with water and giving them a drink. Ishmael's life returned to the boy's eyes at that moment, God decided. Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac. Test Abraham. Abraham called God. "Here I," Abraham answered, always willing to listen to his voice. Then God gave him an instruction that would touch the heart of any parent. "Take your only son Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the region of Moriah and offer him up. In the burnt offering on the mountain that I will show you," Abraham's soul was filled. From a storm of emotions, how could he think that he was a son of promise? But his strong faith got him through, and the next morning he woke up early and ordered with confidence, "To prepare the donkey, we will leave." Dawn took her beloved son Isaac's hand, and together they set off. Arriving at the place appointed by God on the third day, Abraham looked up and saw a faraway place, then told his servant to stay here with the donkey. "The boy and I will go there and worship, and then we will return with. You carry the wood on Isaac's shoulders and hold the fire in his hand." And Knife walked in silence as Isaac said, "Father, "My child, what do you want?" Abraham replied. "We have fire and wood," he said. "Isaac, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham held it. Emotion replied, "God will provide the lamb for my son's burnt offering." They went to the place God had shown them. Abraham built an altar and he arranged the firewood. Every movement is an internal battle. He turned to Isaac. With eyes red from pain and hands shaking, Abraham tied up his son Isaac. Surprised, he exclaimed, "Dad, what are you doing?" Tears fell. God had asked for that. He whispered, "Trust me." He raised his hand, holding the knife to sacrifice. His son, at that moment, a voice from heaven cried out to Abraham. "Abraham," he stopped. "Here is my dry hand," he replied in despair. "Don't reach out." "Boy, don't hurt him now. I know that you fear God because you have not rejected me." Your son, your only Abraham, dropped the knife, and indescribable relief overwhelmed him. The fact that he untied Isaac and hugged him tightly made Isaac's father cry out with his eyes. Filled with tears and surprise, God had mercy on Abraham. Caressing his son's face, Abraham suddenly looked up and saw him. His back was like a ram caught by its horns in a bush without thinking. Many times he took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Afterward, the angel of the Lord called him a second time from heaven and said to him, "I swear, for you have done this and have not spared your son from me, your only son. I will bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. The sands of the sea and your descendants will conquer the cities of your enemies. And through them all the peoples of the earth will be blessed." "You obeyed me." Abraham still had tears in his eyes, hugging his son tightly, and he told him to go home. Sometime later, that news broke Abraham's heart. Sarai's death. Sarai, his beloved wife, died at the age of 127 and felt deep pain. A vast, empty space, but he had to give Sarai a worthy place to rest he had come to. City of Hebron to meet the Hittites, I am a stranger among you. He declared before the sons of Het, giving me possession of a tomb to bury my wife, the sons of Hetlo. They answered, "Hear us, Lord, you are the Prince of God among us. Bury your deceased in our most beautiful grave, no one can refuse you." The tomb was for him to bury his wife, but Abraham insisted that I buy it. The cave of Machpelah belonged to Ephron. Ephron was present among them. Answered, "My lord, I give to my lord the cave, and the field around it is yours," Abraham said firmly. "I will not pay." "The price is fair," Ephron replied. "My lord, please hear me. The land is worth 400 pieces of silver, but between you and I there is nothing buried." Died without hesitation, Abraham weighed the silver and gave it to him, thus having first property in the promised land. So Ephron's field at Machpelah is in the foreground. Mamre, along with the cave and all the trees in the field, became Abraham's property as a tomb. Abraham's family then buried Sarai in the cave of the Machpelah field. In the land of Canaan, Abraham secured a resting place for his family for many generations as one testimony of his commitment to the land God promised him after Sarah's death. Isaac and Rebekah. Abraham found solace and companionship in Keturah, the woman he married. She had 6 more children, thus expanding the family God had promised her, but his son's loneliness worried him because of God's promise to descend upon him. Abraham called Eliezer a faithful servant and asked him to find him a wife. Isaac placed his hand under his master Eliezer's thigh and vowed to complete his mission. Arriving at the city of Nahor, Eliezer stopped at the well outside the city. At the time the women went out to get water, suddenly a young girl appeared. The radiant beauty that appeared was Bethuel, Eliezer's daughter Rebekah, who was surprised. Maybe she wondered if he had approached her and asked her, "Whose daughter are you?" he asked. "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah," Nahor replied. Rebekah was surprised to see that Eliezer was from Abraham's family. "Of course," she said, "there was room and food for you." Camel in Bethuel's house after sharing Eliezer's farming story. May my lord Abraham send me to find a wife for his son Isaac." Rebekah was the chosen one. Rebekah's brothers were Laban and Bethuel. They replied that this came from God. "Take Rebekah, see, go." The next day, Eliezer. He was about to leave on his way back. Isaac was in the fields. Meditating at dusk, when she looked up, she saw a herd of camels approaching, as did Rebekah. He saw him. "Who was that man coming across the field towards us?" he asked. "Eliezer is my lord," he replied. She took the veil and covered herself when they saw Isaac looking at Rebekah and speechless. He felt in his heart that it was. Ms. Rebekah gently said that she had nothing to be shy about. She looked up and eyes met. At that moment, a deep love arose. Abraham saw. His happy son felt his mission was accomplished. He had to face the loss and testing, but God's promises continued through Isaac and Rebekah. Afternoon, as the sun set behind the dunes, Abraham gathered his children around the fire. He told us about God's promise. They asked with shining eyes. Abraham smiled and said, "Lord, he promised that my descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky." Joksan asked curiously, "We are also part of that promise, aren't we, my children?" Abraham replied, looking at each of you, "You are all part of that plan God has for our family over time." Joksan has become the father of Sheba and Dan. Continued the line that God promised. Children's laughter filled the camp, a sign of multiplied blessings, knowing that their days, they were numbered. Abraham called Isaac to his side. "My son," he said in a calm voice, "I leave you all my property. You are the child of the promise I made to Sarai. It is yours. Must continue the legacy that God has given us." Isaac nodded, feeling the burden. Far away, Ishmael, Abraham's first son, heard the news from Hagar. Far away, Ishmael, Abraham's first son, heard the news from Hagar. Arriving at the camp, Isaac was surprised to see Ishmael. "What are you doing here?" "I came to say goodbye." "Our father," answered Ishmael seriously in his bed. Abraham felt the presence of his children, opened his eyes and gave him a weak smile when he saw Isaac and Ishmael, and with a deep peace, Abraham breathed his last. 175 years Abraham walked with God, although there is mention of Isaac and Ishmael. Together they said goodbye to their father. Together they carried their father's body. Abraham at the cave of Machpelah, the family tomb he acquired while they were laying the body. At his resting place, Ishmael looked at Isaac and said that despite the state we are in, the Isaac brothers responded with a small smile, which is how we honor each other today. Our father's desert wind blew gently on both brothers. They understood that Abraham's legacy was not just land and wealth, but also a legacy of faith, and obediently they left the cave with the belief that their father's example would inspire future generations. Trust in God and follow his ways as Abraham did. As the years passed and nations arose from Abraham's descendants, God blessed Isaac with the pregnancy of his wife Rebekah, but Jacob and Esau. Blessings are twins in the womb. Jacob and Esau fought endlessly. Rebekah was confused by the continuity movement in her belly. She came to God. The answer was Clara, 2 countries there in the mother's womb, and the eldest will serve the younger one at birth. Esau came out first, blond and hairy, but Jacob would not let him go. He easily grabbed his brother's heel and chased after him, and that's how it all began. Jacob fought all his life to become the chosen one from his first breath. Esau grew up healthy and wild, a farmer, his father's favorite. Instead, Jacob sought wisdom by listening to the elders. The 2 brothers were always carefully taken care of by Rebekah's mother. One day, Esau returned from a hunting trip exhausted. Hungry, Jacob saw an opportunity and proposed a deal with his inheritance. In exchange for a plate of lentils, Esau impulsively agreed. Ignore their birthright for momentary and consequent gratification. Because of a plate of food, the fate of 2 people changed forever. But Jacob knew that. Even though the birthright was his by oath, he still needed his father's blessing. Time passed and that day came. Isaac, blind from old age and with a weak voice, called Esau to bless him. But Esau was not at home. He went hunting, so Rebekah came in. Jacob made a quick plan. He brought 2 goats from the herd. I will prepare. For a moment he hesitated, but mother, I am smooth and Esau is hairy. Father will touch me and discover. Deception will curse me. Carrying his scent and stew in hand, he headed to his father's shop. Jacob's heart pounded as he heard Isaac's trembling voice greet him. You are my son. My Jacob answered in a small voice. I am Esau, your firstborn son. I have done what I was told. You asked to sit down and eat so you would bless me. Isaac touched him, confused. Esau's hairy hand and the smell of his clothes hesitated for a moment, but finally, the blessing that came from her lips, Jacob with a pounding heart heard. Words that will change your life, that God give you dew of heaven. The fertility of the land and the abundance of grain and wine which the people serve you, and nations bow before you. Now the promise of the Lord is yours, but yours? The deception was soon discovered. Esau returned, and when he went to receive his blessing, Isaac's words were, the somber echo of fulfilled prophecy has received the blessing that more people. I can make my son suddenly understand his brother's deception, and a heart-rending cry came from the depths of his soul. Father, bless me. But the blessing has been given, and there is no turning back the wrath of. Esau's heart burned within him, and as he left the tent, he swore, when my father, dead I will kill my brother Jacob, but Rebekah always alert here. Esau's hateful words and Jacob's warning about your brother's plans. Kill you, flee to my brother Laban's house in Aram. Stay there until the wrath of your brother. Calm down. Jacob is forced to run away, leaving everything behind, walking alone through desert with the weight of deception on his shoulders and an uncertain future ahead. Every step took him further away from home, family, and everything he had ever known. The darkness of night fell, and in the middle of the desert, Jacob lay down. Pranam. A stone, and suddenly fell asleep. Something extraordinary happened in him. Dream of a ladder from the ground to the sky, and angels ascending and descending on it at great height. The Lord is there, and his voice is over Jacob. I am the Lord your God. I, your father Abraham and the God of Isaac, will give the land on which you are lying to you and to your descendants after you. Descendants will be like dust and will spread from west to east. In the north and in the south, and in you and in your descendants, all families of the earth, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go, Jacob. He awoke in amazement and fear, certain that God was in this place. And I did not know that he called that place Bethel, the house of God, and promised that if God brought him back safely, and he would be his God at dawn. Jacob followed his way to the land of Aram, with God's promise echoing in his mind, and his brother's fear followed him step by step after many days of walking. Finally, he reached the land. Near the house of his uncle Laban, there beside a well, Jacob and Rachel. The encounter changed his life forever. As he approached the well, he saw some shepherds who were waiting for their sheep to drink came near them, and he asked them about his uncle Laban. The shepherds replied that his daughter Rachel was coming with the sheep. Suddenly Jacob saw a young girl approaching, and his heart skipped a beat. It was Rachel, Laban's daughter. He loved her from the first moment, and then with a force. In what had never been done before, he lifted the heavy stone out of the well and gave it to the man to drink. Rachel, Jacob's sheep, told her who he was, and Rachel was surprised and excited. He ran to tell his father Laban when Laban heard the news of his nephew. He came and ran out to greet him, hug him, and take him home. Jacob began working for his uncle, but his desire to be with Rachel grew stronger. After a month, Laban made him an offer. It was unfair for him to work for him. I don't have a salary. Tell me the salary you want. Jacob did not hesitate to answer. I will work for you 7 years by Rachel, your youngest daughter. Laban accepted, and so on. Jacob's days were filled with hard work, but his heart was full of hope and love. Rachel's wedding day has finally arrived. The wedding has been prepared, and Jacob is very anxious. picked up Raquel when his wife celebrated the union with a big party, but that night in the darkness, Laban committed a deception that Jacob never expected. Instead of Rachel, she brought her eldest daughter Leah to Jacob's bed and upon her. Tomorrow Jacob arrives and discovers the cruel truth that it was his own uncle who deceived him. Just like how he had deceived his brother many years ago, Jacob angrily confronted Laban, what have you done to me? I don't work for Rachel. Why did you lie to me? He answered calmly and without remorse, we do not have the custom of marrying the youngest daughter first. Major finishes the wedding week with Leah, and I will also trade Rachel to you for the others. 7 years of work, Jacob's heart was broken, but his love for Raquel was stronger than her anger, so she accepted the deal, and a week later she married Raquel, even though he knew that his life was now linked with many more difficult years. Working under the supervision of his cunning uncle, the days passed and Jacob was the sons of Jacob. He was caught up in a new struggle. He loved Rachel deeply, but Leah was his. God's wife also saw Jacob's contempt for Leah and gave him children. While Rachel was still barren, she had already given birth to Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, while Rachel silently endured the tension in Jacob's house. Day by day, she grew up, despite giving him 4 children that she saw. Sadness that Jacob continues to love Rachel more than her. Rachel, despairing of being able to bear Jacob children, searched for a solution. So, in an act of utter frustration, Rachel proposed to Jacob, Bilhah's servant, in hopes that through his work, he can have children that Jacob accepts and Bilhah gives. Gave birth to 2 children, Naphtali and Raquel, although she was not the mother. Biology regards them as its own and screams with joy at great efforts. I fought with my sister and won, but that victory wasn't enough to fill the void. In her heart, she felt that the rivalry between the 2 sisters was increasing. Seeing that she had stopped having children, she did not want to be left behind. She gave her maid a rough cloth, and 2 more sons were born, Gath and Asher. The tension in the house becomes unbearable as each woman vies for Jacob's affections while he is caught in the middle. He saw his family expand, but the peace faded over the years, and he read the way. If the hand of God visits her again, she will conceive again and give birth to Issachar. Then came Zebulun, and finally came a daughter named Dinah. But Rachel's longing is still a shadow covering the family. The pain, the disappointment, the helplessness in the face of infertility. Tormented day and night, however, one day when everything seemed lost for Rachel, God heard her cry in the moment of divine grace when Rachel conceived. And she gave birth to a son that day. Rachel held the baby in her arms, and tears of joy say that God has taken away my shame. He has called his son Joseph, and with him a new chapter has opened in Jacob's life. Joseph was more than just a son of Jacob. He was the son of the woman he loved more than anyone else and with whom Joseph was born. Hope rekindled in Jacob's heart as time passed, and he tried to increase his flock by amassing great wealth, but Yub felt the same way. Jacob fled from Laban. Tension increased around him. The whispers of Laban's sons rang out in the air, accusing him of having. They said he stole his father's property and everything he had came from our father's money. Jealous Jacob looked at the eyes Laban had previously looked at him with. Familiarity is now filled with resentment and distrust of the wind. Changed at that time, God directly told Jacob to return to the land of your fathers. And I will be with you. That sacred promise lit a spark in his heart. It was time. And I will be with you. That sacred promise lit a spark in his heart. It was time. Laban, with a serious voice, shared his escape plan. Rachel was the first to speak. Everything that God took away from our father belongs to us. What we do is for our future. Leah's Sioux children surely know that they have nothing more to lose at dawn. The sun had just appeared on the horizon. Jacob, his wife and children, and his vastness. Cattle they silently left for Canaan. But there is a secret that Jacob did not know Rachel without telling him that he had taken away her family idols. Father, that small act will bring a storm of tension when he escapes. Vanan angrily discovered that his family and fortune were gone, without any loss. Time gathered his men and pursued them for 7 days at his heart's content. He was burning with rage, but in the middle of the night, God appeared to him in a dream and spoke to him. Be careful when talking to Jacob. Don't interfere in his work. The word of God stopped Laban's motivation, but did not stop his desire to confront Jacob. Laban finally reached Jacob. On Mount Gilead, his cry broke the silence of the camp. You lied to me, and you took my daughter as a prisoner of war without the warning of. Your Lord has already done justice, Jacob responded strongly. Worked 20 years for you, 14 years for your daughters, and 6 years for your sheep, 10 times. You changed my salary. If it wasn't for my father's God, I would be leaving empty-handed now. But God saw my suffering, and Laban have reproached you for looking for reasons to maintain. Control my requests, and God, someone stole my idol Jacob without knowing Rachel. Responded with the challenge of finding the camp if you find one. Something of yours that the dead sinner Laban started looking for in the stores. Checking every corner, the air was filled with tension as his men inspected each item one by one. Of Jacob and his family, when it was Rachel's turn to check on her, cunningly sat on the saddle of his camel where he had hidden the idols. When Laban approached, she said in a gentle voice, "Sorry, father, I can't. Stand up, I have Laban disease without any doubt." He removed the idols. They were not found, and a fruitless confrontation ensued. From that confrontation, Jacob and Laban knew that they could not continue like this. The mountains of Gilead, in a solemn act, Jacob and Laban made a covenant. They vowed not to harm each other, marking their final separation. Jacob placed a stone to make it the sign of the covenant, and they ate together in peace, even though the wounds of the past still stung. In his heart, as the covenant was made, Jacob felt free for the first time in many years. 5 roads to Canaan opened before him under the guidance and protection of God. Jacob continued his journey with his family by his side, but the weight of the past weighed heavily on his heart. He knew that he would soon have to face his brother Esau. Reunited with Esau, the one he deceived and betrayed years ago, the memory of Saul's wrath haunts him. The last time they met, Esau swore to kill him for stealing his blessing. Now time has passed, but there is uncertainty about what Esau will do. The air was filled with fear. Jacob, looking for a way out, sent messengers to Seir, on the plains of Edom, in the hope of appeasing his brother Esau, that his servant Jacob returned with much wealth, which he sought. But when the messengers returned, their word brought terrifying news. Esau was coming toward him with 400. Man, Jacob's heart sank in deep fear of the danger that surrounded him, and tension enveloped him like a black cloak. Jacob desperately devised a plan and divided his family and possessions into 2 groups if Esau attacked at least one of the 2 groups. Groups that can escape feel vulnerable, knowing that it is dangerous. But he had faith, so he gave Esau a generous offering of sheep. Goats, camels, cows, and donkeys were sent ahead. Jacob expected that the gifts will in turn soften his brother's heart before they finally meet face to face. In despair, Jacob knelt down and prayed to the God of his fathers. Jacob wrestled with the angel of the Lord. Night, and Jacob gathered his 2 wives and 11 sons to cross over. Jacob forded a fast-flowing stream with cold, fast-flowing water, relentlessly onslaught as Jacob led his family to the afterlife. When his family safe on the other side, Jacob turned around to make sure his belongings were safe as well. Jacob was left alone in the darkness, and there was sudden, complete silence. A mysterious figure appeared, and without saying a word, the power of strange was supernatural, and Jacob engaged in an intense fight with the man. He hit with great force, but Jacob did not let himself be defeated. It's a war for his life, for his destiny, for everything that God promised him in those moments. They passed through and no one surrendered. It's like time has stopped, and the only thing there existed, that great struggle, which man found he could not defeat. Jacob touched his dislocated hip immediately. The pain was intense, but Jacob still didn't let go, panting. With sweat on his forehead, he shouted, "Don't. I will let go until you bless me with words that echo in the darkness." Full of despair and strength, suddenly the light speaks with authority as your name. Jacob was exhausted but resolutely replied, "Jacob." He would no longer be called Jacob. Jacob said, "Now you will be Israel because you have fought with God and with men, and you have..." The first rays of dawn illuminate the sky in silhouette. Disappeared, even though when due to pain there was... Blessings were transformed, his name, his identity, everything was changed that night. Jacob, now Israel, limped across the river and met. With his family, Jacob knew that the scariest moment of his life was about to come. Jacob left his brother Esau to see him again. Family protected behind him, heading towards horizon where he last saw him. The image of Esau approaching with his 400 men is the moment of confrontation. His fate, the air was filled with tension and time became heavy. But what? What happened next is a testament to the transformative power of forgiveness. Suddenly, Esau ran and hugged Jacob, his eyes half closed in fear. Fear felt the strength of his brother's arms around Jacob with teary eyes. His eyes told her in a trembling voice, seeing her face was like seeing mine. God, after the reunion, Esau suggested they travel together. "Come with me, Jacob. I will protect you. Let's move forward together." But Jacob replied cautiously, "My Lord knows that. The children are weak, and I have sheep and cows that breed if they are forced. Go too fast, they will die. Please allow me to move at my own pace, and we will meet." In Sarah saw him, accepted his brother's request, and after a peaceful farewell, their paths parted again. Jacob continued. The journey that carried the promise of a bright future has finally arrived. Shechem was in the land of Canaan, between Mount Ebal and Gerim. Sacred to his people there, Jacob bought a plot of land in Deir. Knew this was a good place to settle, but the peace seemed... Dinah's tragedy. Achieved will not exist in the same land of Shechem that happened one of the most tragic acts that would mark the life of Jacob and his family, his daughter Dinah. Born of Leah, went out to meet the women of the land of innocence. His passing did not herald the horrors to come, always the child of love. The prince of this land saw her lust filled in his eyes, and in an act, cruelty and selfishness took her by force and robbed her. Shechem loved Dinah, and the very man who had humiliated her now wanted her. As a wife with wounded pride, she went to her loving father and begged him, "Find me this young woman to be my wife." When Jacob heard of the tragedy, he came to hug his daughter while his sons returned from the fields. But in anger and pain in his heart increased as Simeon, Levi, and the rest, his children found out about this, and their faces darkened with uncontrollable anger. The proposal was considered an unacceptable insult to her family and honor. Afterwards, her children. Jacob devised an ingenious plan. He proposed a clear solution. "It is honorable if you want us to unite as a people that all men. Your city is circumcised as a sign of this covenant." Shechem was blinded by his lust for Dinah, and Hamar's eagerness to maintain peace is accepted without suspecting the third trap. Days passed, and grief weakened all the men of Shechem after the circumcision. Then Simeon and Levi took up their swords. Night fell on the city, and revenge. It exploded with uncontrollable ferocity. The brothers were... House by house, they killed all the males, including Shechem and his father. Jamor's blood flowed through the streets, and the city believed in. The promise of peace has been reduced to violent chaos, transformed into disgrace. During a massacre, Jacob, upon learning of the massacre, shuddered at the sight of blood. Pouring out will not bring peace, but war. He looked at his children. His hands were stained with blood, and with a mixture of despair and anger, he told them, "You have made me hateful. The population of this land is very small, and if they unite against us, we will be destroyed. They will destroy, but their children, still full of anger, just reply, 'It will happen.' Treating your sister like a prostitute is the real danger, Jacob. Deciding that they could not stay in Shechem any longer, they had to leave before revenge came. They headed for Bethel is where many years ago Jacob saw the ladder to heaven, and where he wrestled with God at Bethel. God appeared to him, and to a deep voice said, "To multiply from you a new nation will be born. Even a council of nations and kings will have these words echoing from your guts." The promise to Abraham and Isaac is a confirmation that although Jacob's descendants, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the promise, built an altar at Bethel, he anointed the stone with a firm hand, marking the place where God. I talked to him, but as the journey continued, a dark figure appeared. Rachel's death. Rachel, the woman Jacob loved more than anyone, began to get in his way. Another person starts to feel labor pains, but something is wrong. Fear. It was reflected in his eyes, and Jacob watched helplessly as his wife struggled. Let life come to a stop, and screams filled the air. The midwife tried to comfort her. "Don't be afraid, you have a son." But the news did not get through. That was enough to end the pain that was tormenting Raquel in her final moments. The moment life left her body, Raquel named her son Benoni. Means the last breath of Raquel, the son of my pain. Marked by pain, but also by love for the son he left behind. Jacob was devastated. At this moment, he could not accept this fate for his son. While holding his newborn baby in his arms, he decided that the name his beloved wife had given him would no longer exist. Benoni said, his voice broke with sadness, would be Benjamin means son of fortune, although his birth was marked by pain. Jacob. He wanted his son to grow up under the sign of blessing, not misfortune. Rachel's loss was a blow to Jacob. She is the one he loves, the woman he works for 14. For years, she filled her life with meaning on the road to Bethlehem. He buried her and erected a stone that would be an eternal witness to his love for her. The road led him back to Mamre, sacred place to his father and his family. Isaac, Jacob's father, lived until the death of Isaac. At 180 years old, when the day of his death came, Jacob felt that a cycle has occurred. The family patriarch has passed away, but his legacy of faith and obedience remains profound. Originating from his sons, the news of Isaac's death was brought to Esau, his brother. Returning to their common life, they carried Isaac's body to its resting place. And when the tomb closed on Isaac, Jacob felt the responsibility now falls entirely on his shoulders. God's promise has passed away. Abraham to Isaac now rested on his lineage. He was the father of 12 sons, the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, and through them the people of God. Jacob will grow up looking at his children and seeing the future each one carries within them. Yes, not only his blood, but also the weight of a divine destiny. The covenant of God is not only to him, but also to his descendants, as it happened to his grandfather Abraham before him, but among all his descendants. Joseph and his dreams. One thing stands out. Joseph, the penultimate brother, is different. He was the son of his beloved wife Rachel and had a special grace that seemed to surround him. Jacob, as a sign of this love, gave him a colorful tunic, but this favoritism aroused jealousy among his brothers as day after day they saw Jacob. He looked at Joseph with pride, while the older ones hardly received any praise. A small part of that attention, but what really lights the fire of hatred in their hearts are the dreams of Jose dreamed, and in his dreams he saw his destiny even though he did not. He understood that well. One night, he told one of those dreams to his brothers. We were binding rice in the field when suddenly my sheaf stood up and stand up straight while yours bow before mine. His brother's anger flared up. Hearing these words, perhaps you intend to rule us? They rebuked him, but Joseph had another more daring dream, and he also recounted it. I saw the sun. The moon and 11 stars bowed before me. His father Jacob became restless and what does he think this dream means? Maybe mom, brothers, and I will bow our heads. before his brothers, although Jacob kept these words in his heart, his brothers. Joseph could not bear it any longer. The seeds of resentment had sprouted, and soon jealousy would turn into a plan to eliminate him one day while he was herding cattle away from home. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. They saw Joseph approaching, wearing a colorful robe as if it were a reminder, constant of his special place in his father's heart. "This is the dreamer." They said contemptuously, "Kill it and throw it down the well. We will say it is a wild animal. He ate it all and we'll see how his dream ends." But Reuben is the oldest. He begged, "Let us not shed blood," he said. "Let us shed blood on his head." Harm Reuben, who planned to rescue Joseph later and return him to his father. When Joseph came, they stripped him of his clothes and threw him into the well, where he was left alone. And fear deep inside, we sat down to eat, indifferent to him. Suffering then, a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants appeared approaching. To Egypt, Judah suggested that what would we gain by killing him? We sell him to these people. The last Ishmaelites were our blood, so Joseph was sold for 20 silver pieces and were taken as slaves in Egypt, while the brothers returned home with goat blood-stained cloak. Jacob wept, grieving the death of his son Amado Jose, who was sold into slavery. Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh, commander of the guard, was away from home, and family is never alone. God's presence is always with you and everything. Potiphar soon realized that there was something special about Joseph and placed him in charge of his entire house. Potiphar's trust in us when he saw Joseph was young. The attractive and successful tried to seduce him day after day, but Jose remained steadfast. Integrity and loyalty to God were repeatedly denied when my Lord told him, "He trusted me and held nothing back except you, because you are his wife." Could have committed this great sin and sinned against God, but she did not give up one day when, at that time, Joseph was alone in the house. She grabbed his cloak and tried to force herself on him. Joseph ran away and left his cloak in the woman's hands, but this act of loyalty cost him dearly. Full of anger and her insults, she falsely accused him of trying to defame her. When Potiphar, he heard the story and became angry and ordered Joseph to be imprisoned, so Joseph left.
The manager of a large house becomes a prisoner in a dark cell, but even there, the hand of God was with him in prison. Joseph won the favor of the jailer, who gave him the task of watching over the other prisoners. God continued to show. Joseph's loyalty and gifts did not go unnoticed by the two prisoners. Looking deeply into their suffering, Joseph said to them, "The explanations do not belong to God. Tell me." "Your dream," the winemaker recounts his first dream. "I dreamed of a vine with 3. The branch sprouts, blooms, and bears grapes. I squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup and gave it to him in Joseph's hand," explaining. "The dream of 3 branches is 3 days, and 3 days Pharaoh will restore position and you will serve him again, but please remember to mention me to Pharaoh. When you are free," the baker sees the explanation favorably. "Share my dream. I dreamed I was carrying 3 baskets of bread on my head and birds. They ate from the top basket with regret." Joseph explained that the 3 baskets were 3. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will take your life and your body will be hung, and birds will eat you." And that happened 3 days later on Pharaoh's birthday. The cupbearer was reinstated and the baker was executed like Joseph had predicted, but the cupbearer in his joy forgot to mention Joseph. Pharaoh had passed 2 years, and Joseph was still in prison waiting and believing in God's purpose. Then Pharaoh had 2 dreams that no one could understand. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream, explained that in his time the cupbearer remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about young Jew in prison can interpret Joseph's dreams that were brought before. Pharaoh, despite his humble appearance, had great faith in God. Undeterred when Pharaoh asked him to interpret his dream, Joseph replied firmly that it was not in me, but God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Pharaoh told his dream to Joseph, in the first dream, I saw myself standing on the banks of the Nile and water flowing out. 7 beautiful and fat cows were grazing among the reeds, and then the others. 7 cows came after them, but they were ugly, and the ugly, skinny cows ate the fat cows, but in doing so, they remained the same. Then, as before, in the second dream, I saw 7 ears of rice full, and beautiful ears of corn grew on a single stalk. Then 7 dry ears of corn sprouted, and scorched by the east wind, and the withered ears of rice have swallowed the ears of rice. The Pharaoh was restless, and no one in his court could give him any advice. The explanation reassured Joseph, who believed that God had the answer. He explained that both dreams had the same meaning, that God was revealed to him. Pharaoh, what will happen to the 7 fat cows and the 7 full ears of grain? Symbolizes 7 years of abundance throughout Egypt, but 7 cows. Symbolizes 7 years of abundance throughout Egypt, but 7 cows. Years of plenty will be followed by a famine so severe that it will make you forget. Understand that the country must be governed during 7 years of prosperity. Food had to be collected and stored in the cities as a reserve for famine years so that Egypt would not perish. The Pharaoh and his court were not only impressed by the scarcity, Joseph's wisdom, but also because of his insight and confidence. Pharaoh said, "We can find a man like this one, who has the Spirit of God." So Pharaoh made a decision to send Joseph's life to always, since God has revealed all these things to you, there is no one wiser, and it is understood that you will be assigned to manage my palace, and all my people will obey. Your command on my throne will be greater than yours. So Joseph, the young Jew, the man who had been sold into slavery and unjustly imprisoned, was promoted to governor of Egypt, second in command. Power second only to the Pharaoh, they gave him a signet ring, fine linen clothes, and a gold chain, and Pharaoh had him taken around the country The royal carriage let everyone know about his new position. Joseph started working. Immediately organized a grain harvest. During the 7 years of prosperity, he had stored a large amount of food in every city, predicting difficult years ahead. The abundance was so great that they stopped keeping track of grain because it was like sand of the sea when the famine years come, just as Joseph predicted. Not only Egypt, but also the surrounding lands have suffered from shortages, however, thanks to planning. Joseph of Egypt had enough provisions. People from all over flocked to him, bought wheat, and Joseph became the savior of many nations. Joseph reunited with his brothers. An unexpected thing happened among the people who came to buy food, was that it was his brothers who had. They sold him into slavery, but when they saw him, they did not recognize him because Joseph was now the powerful man dressed as an Egyptian, but Joseph immediately recognized his feelings and pain. The past was mixed in his heart, but Joseph remained calm and decided to try. His brothers, to see if they had changed, told them that one of them had to stay in prison while others returned with grain for their families and brought. His younger brother kept them for 3 days to prove his honesty. The prisoners were thinking about their next steps. On Tuesday, he told them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God if you are honest men. Let me. One of your brothers is in prison and you bring grain for your family's hunger, but bring your brother here to prove your words and you will not die." The 2 brothers said to each other in their own languages, "We have indeed sinned against our brother because we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us and we did not listen to him. That is why it has come upon us." This suffering, they did not know that Joseph understood them because he spoke to them through an interpreter. Turned away to cry, but then returned and took Simeon away. Binding it before them, they returned to Canaan and told their father Jacob everything, including the request to bring the suffering Benjamin. Jacob told me, "Deprived of my children, Joseph is not, Simeon is not, and now they want to take Benjamin." All these things fell upon me. The famine continued, and finally Jacob agreed to let Benjamin go with his brothers to bring gifts in double amount to return what was found in their bag. The brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin. When Joseph saw them, he ordered his steward to bring them to his house. "Prepare a feast and calm them down." Then Joseph frees Simeon and he gathered him together with them. When he saw Benjamin, his heart was moved and he invited them. Dinner and arranged them in order of birth, surprising them when the waiter gave Benjamin his portions. 5 times larger than the others, wanting to test their loyalty, he ordered. The steward filled his sack with grain and returned the money, but he also had his silver cup put in the sack. The next morning of Benjamin, the Benjamin brothers left but did not leave yet. Walked away when the manager caught up with them and accused them of stealing the cup. They maintained their innocence, but the cup was found in Benjamin Judah's sack. He spoke up for Benjamin by offering to stay as a slave in his place so as not to cause further suffering to his father. Jose could not contain his emotions in the tearful moment, and reconciliation was revealed to them when he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, which you sold to Egypt, but do not be sad or blame me for having sold here, because God himself sent me before you to save your lives. He transformed you. Turn evil into good to save many people." Joseph sent someone to invite his father. Jacob and his entire family lived in Egypt in the region of Goshen, where they will be protected and cared for during the years of famine. Jacob, knowing that his son Joseph was still alive, he was filled with joy and exclaimed, "Now I can die in peace, for I have seen your face, and I know that you live." Joseph, now reunited with him. The family lived happy and grateful moments. Jacob and his sons were welcomed in Egypt and settled in the fertile land of Goshen, where they prospered under the protection of Pharaoh and the supervision of Joseph. Jacob, he lived another 17 years in Egypt and watched his family grow up. And fortified before his death, he called Joseph and asked him to promise solemnly not to let his body rest in Egypt, but to take his body away. Return to the land of Canaan, to the graves of Abraham and Isaac. Joseph swore fulfilled this desire by reaffirming his commitment to God's covenant that bound his family to this land. Engaged, Jacob feels that his doom is near. Jacob blesses his sons. He gathered his sons together to bless them. Jacob's words were not only the blessing, but also the prophecy of the fate of each tribe will emerge from his sons. When it was Joseph's turn, Jacob blessed his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, secured them a place among the tribes of Israel. Jacob was curious. He clasped his hands as he blessed them, placing his right hand on Ephraim, the younger. Manasseh's place, the elder. Joseph tried to correct him, but Jacob insisted that, "I know. My son, I know that Manasseh will be great too, but his brother will be even greater. The eldest and his descendants will form countless nations after being blessed." All of Jacob's final words reaffirm God's promise of the death of Jacob. The land of Canaan then ended in peace, surrounded by the completed Joseph family. The promise to his father asked Pharaoh for permission to take. Jacob arrived in Canaan and a large funeral was held after his burial. Joseph could take revenge for what they did to him years ago, so they sent a message to Joseph saying, Jacob left final instructions for Joseph to forgive their sins. Upon hearing this, Joseph wept and he said to them, "Do not be afraid. I am in the place of God. You are thinking to do evil, but God turned it into a good thing, so that many lives have been preserved to this day. So fear, I will take care of you and your children." Joseph lived. The death of Joseph.
Until he was 110 years old, seeing his children and grandchildren grow up before he died, he called family and made them swear that when God visited them, he would bring them back. The promised land where they would carry his bones many years later. Jacob's descendants will be enslaved in Egypt, but God's promise will not fail over time. Indicates that God would raise up Moses to lead them to freedom, and in that exodus, Joseph's bones will be carried as a symbol of covenant fulfillment and loyalty. God's boundless love for his people. Subscribe to this channel now to be able to get the next releases of great Christian movies. And if you like it, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. I love that. God bless you. Amen.